was smiling at me.
How do we stop it?
We need to kill you first.
What?
The film begins 6 days after the events of the previous part, as Joel, tormented by the Simle demon, locates the home of 2 dealers. He waits for one of the brothers to arrive, pulls a mask over his face, threatens him, and takes him hostage. The man attempts to intimidate Joel, but Joel forces him into a room where the second dealer sits. Joel reminds them of the crime they committed together, but they only laugh at his threats. Desperate, Joel pulls out a knife and eliminates one of the brothers, hoping to break the curse. The other brother attempts to eliminate Joel, but he falls to Joel's bullet instead. As Joel realizes the witness meant to inherit the curse is now dead, panic sets in. Then, from the next room, he hears noises and finds a drug buyer pleading for his life. Joel apologizes and steps outside, only to be ambushed by the dealer's accomplices. He narrowly escapes through a side exit, but as he reaches the street, a car slams into him, leaving his body crushed and smeared across the asphalt in a grotesque trail resembling a giant smile. Sometime later, in New York, pop star Skye Riley arrives for an interview with Drew Barrymore. Despite her successful career, Skye struggles with substance abuse and alcohol, still recovering from a car accident that claimed the life of her boyfriend, actor Paul Hudson. During the interview, Drew asks about her upcoming tour. Skye opens up about the stress and illness she has faced but expresses gratitude for her return. She offers a heartfelt apology to her fans, loved ones, and team. Skye recalls the depths of despair that once drove her to tear clumps of hair from her own head, but she insists she has learned to regain control over her life. After the show, she leaves the studio with her mother, Elizabeth, stopping to take photos with the many fans gathered outside. Later, in the car, her assistant, Joshua, shows her the soaring ratings from her appearance. Inspired, Skye resolves to work harder, hoping her upcoming tour will mark her triumphant return to glory. During a rehearsal, however, Skye is struck by a sharp, sudden pain in her back. The choreographer voices concern, but Skye brushes it off, insisting she simply stumbled and that the pain will soon pass. She refuses to take a break, pressing on with determination. But as the pain intensifies later, she decides to numb it with strong painkillers. She retrieves a pill box, only to drop it in alarm when someone unexpectedly knocks on her door. Standing in the doorway is Elizabeth, reminding her that the group is waiting. Skye hides her pain from her mother, but in the car it becomes unbearable. Later, she receives a message from Lewis, a dealer and former classmate. Claiming she needs rest, Skye tells her mother she's going to bed, then quietly calls a taxi and heads to Lewis's apartment. Upon her arrival, Lewis grabs her and threatens her with a sword. Panic-stricken, Skye pleads with him to put the weapon down, reminding him that he had invited her and that she only came for medicine. Suspicious, Lewis checks her phone and finds the message, though he doesn't remember sending it. Confused and stressed, he drops the sword and begins to cry, admitting something is haunting him. Skye decides to leave, but Lewis begs her to stay, promising he'll calm down. Reluctantly, she sits as he goes to retrieve the medicine. Left alone, she notices a TV report that brings back memories of last year's tragedy. Turning off the screen, she calls for Lewis, but there's no response. Venturing to the bedroom, she's startled when a deranged Lewis suddenly leaps out. He collapses before her, choking violently as though consumed by a vision of something terrifying, leaving Skye frozen in horror. But he suddenly fixes her with a strange, chilling smile, his eyes locked on hers. She stumbles back, falling to the floor and crawling away in terror as she watches him pick up a weight plate and savagely smash it into his own face. The horrifying act ends with Lewis collapsing lifelessly, and Skye flees the apartment in utter panic. Returning home, she feels trapped in a twisted reality. Grabbing a bottle of water to calm herself, she attempts to compose her thoughts. But as she runs a comb through her hair, it gets stuck. Yanking it free, she pulls out a clump of hair and feels a fleeting, unsettling sense of control. Exhausted, she lies down to rest. Jolted awake, she scans her surroundings and freezes at the sight of Lewis's bloody figure standing before her. As soon as she switches on the light, the apparition vanishes. The next day, Skye throws herself into preparing for her tour, determined to block out the previous night's horror. At a fan meeting, she sits in a makeup chair as her mother reminds her of Gemma, her best friend, with whom she's grown distant since the accident. Joshua offers his own advice, but his words irritate Skye. The tension is interrupted by Darius, a longtime fan who enters to request she perform at a charity dinner for his foundation for troubled teens. Skye agrees and moves on to a photo shoot. Later, she opens Gemma's contact on her phone, but hesitates to call. Just as she contemplates it, an eerie sensation washes over her, as if someone else is in the room. Skye looks around but finds nothing. Turning to the mirror, her blood runs cold. Lewis's horrifying reflection looms behind her. His hands stretch forward, grabbing her face and pulling her lips into a grotesque smile. Skye screams and swats at him, only to realize it was an illusion. Her mother, Joshua, and a costumer rush into the room, alarmed by her scream. Quickly, Skye blames her outburst on the costume, claiming she dislikes it and refusing to wear it. Later, she rehearses on stage, trying to regain her focus, then attends a fan autograph session. During the event, a man named Alfredo grows overly aggressive, grabbing her and muttering about wanting to peel off her skin. Rattled, Skye pulls away and moves to the next group of fans. Among them is a little girl who approaches silently, her face frozen in an unnerving wide smile. Skye tries to engage her, signing her t-shirt and asking questions, but the child says nothing, walking away still grinning. The encounter unsettles Skye deeply. That evening, she receives an anonymous message from someone who knows she was at Lewis's apartment. Shaken, she pulls out another clump of hair and finally calls Gemma. Leaving a heartfelt voicemail apology, she is relieved when Gemma calls back almost immediately. Skye invites her over, eager for the comfort of a familiar face. To pass the time while waiting, Skye sits at the piano and begins to sing. Suddenly, the sharp sound of shattering glass jolts Skye from her thoughts. She scans the room and spots a broken water bottle on the floor. Uneasy, she grabs a mop, but as she moves, she finds something that freezes her. A t-shirt she had signed for Alfredo, along with his belongings scattered around. Dread creeps over her as she looks down a dim hallway and thinks she sees Alfredo lurking at the end, poised to attack. Panicked, she rushes to the door, where Gemma greets her, bewildered by Skye's obvious fear. Confused, Skye glances back and finds the water bottle intact on the table, as if nothing had happened. Overwhelmed, she hugs Gemma, only to be startled when Gemma mentions that Skye had called her an hour earlier. Skye reaches for the water bottle again, but Skye reassures her, explaining that her therapist recommended it to help her feel grounded. Skye apologizes for the mistakes she made in their friendship and opens up about the horrifying incident with Lewis. Listening intently, Gemma agrees to stay the night, offering comfort and companionship. As Skye rests, her mind is suddenly transported to the wreckage of her past. She sees herself trapped in a mangled car, her leg broken and throbbing with pain. Beside her lies Paul's lifeless body. Her cries for help echo as she jolts awake in her bed. She shares her thoughts with Gemma, confessing that she felt a darkness within herself even before the accident. Gemma's response cuts deep. She calls Skye a horrible person. Stunned, Skye reaches out to her friend, but Gemma's face twists into a demonic smile. A car horn blares, yanking Skye from her nightmare, and she tumbles from the bed. Disoriented, she hears Gemma's cheerful voice calling from the kitchen, announcing breakfast. Moments later, Elizabeth bursts in, chastising Skye for missing rehearsal. Skye scrambles to get ready, following her mother out the door. At the studio, Skye apologizes to the team before stepping onto the stage for rehearsal. The routine begins smoothly, but mid-performance, she sees Paul's image before her. Her focus shatters as excruciating pain shoots through her broken leg, and she collapses. Furious, she accuses a dancer of throwing her off balance, but the choreographer firmly denies it, having seen no such thing. Enraged and humiliated, Skye storms into her dressing room, only to find it trashed. Her anger turns on Joshua, but Elizabeth intervenes, pointing out that Joshua has been with her all day. The tension boils over as Elizabeth reminds Skye that everyone rallied around her after the accident, and now it's her responsibility to ensure the tour's success. Struck by the weight of her mother's words, Skye begins to grasp how erratic and strange she must seem to those around her. That evening, Skye arrives at Darius's charity event. Backstage, she receives yet another anonymous message about her visit to Lewis's apartment. The pressure mounts as she nervously smudges her lipstick, trying to steady herself before stepping onto the stage. As she reads the greeting from the teleprompter, the text abruptly cuts off. Without missing a beat, Skye improvises, but her words take an unexpected turn, morphing into a raw, personal monologue about her struggles with substance abuse, her voice trembling as the audience listens in rapt silence. The teleprompter flickers back to life, and without thinking, Skye invites Paul Hudson onto the stage. The words stun the audience into silence. Then, as if conjured by her own invitation, Skye sees Paul in the crowd. Panic grips her, and she screams for him to stop smiling. An elderly woman nearby reaches out to calm her. But in her hysteria, Skye sees Paul in the woman's face and shoves her off the stage, sending the crowd into a collective gasp of horror. Skye flees in terror. Once home, her phone buzzes relentlessly with messages from an unknown number. The stranger taunts her, claiming to know everything she sees and feels. One message includes a chilling video of Lewis's documented encounter with the smiling demon. The stranger urges her to meet him in public. Desperate for answers, Skye dons a plain jacket and heads to a quiet cafe where she meets a man named Morris. Morris explains his own tragic connection to the entity. His brother fell victim to it, driven to a gruesome end. He has studied the demon's pattern and found Skye's number on Lewis's phone. From his research, Morris has concluded that the smiling demon is a parasitic force that will not leave a living host. To escape its grip, Morris proposes an extreme solution, stopping Skye's heart, only to revive her moments later, forcing the demon to leave her body. Skye recoils, rejecting the horrifying idea. She rushes to leave, but before she can escape the cafe, several fans recognize her. They snap photos and, to her dismay, praise her for her heroic act involving the elderly woman. Back at home, Skye tries to calm down, but the walls feel like they're closing in. Searching for substances or alcohol to ease her nerves, she finds nothing, and she angrily rips out a tuft of her own hair before trashing the apartment in a fit of rage. The chaos in her mind materializes as her dancers appear before her, their faces frozen in grotesque, menacing smiles. One dancer forces his hand down her throat, and everything goes black as Skye loses consciousness. In the darkness of her mind, memories resurface. She relives the night of the accident. She and Paul had been under the influence, and the realization dawns. The tragedy was her fault. Guilt and regret crush her as the truth consumes her. Skye awakens in the sterile brightness of a hospital room. Doctors examine her, explaining that she was found unconscious in her apartment. Her mother, Elizabeth, sits at her bedside, and Skye pleads with her to cancel the tour. Elizabeth's response is cold and firm. Canceling would destroy Skye's career and bankrupt them, with the record label ready to sue for millions. Furious, Skye accuses her mother of caring only about money. But as she speaks, the entity appears before her, wearing Elizabeth's face. Skye lashes out, smashing a mirror, shards cutting into her skin as her sanity unravels. Skye bolts toward the door, the shard gripped tightly in her hand, her robe soaked with blood. She tries to flee, but as she makes it to the hallway, Joshua spots her in her horrific state. Doctors and security rush to her, but in a frantic blur, she snatches a guard's gun, threatening to stop anyone from getting closer. Outside, Skye encounters Gemma. Holding the gun to the driver, she forces him to hand over the car so she can get to Morris. Gemma insists on driving, but during their ride, Skye's phone rings. It's the real Gemma, calling her from miles away. The realization hits her like a gut punch. The entity had been impersonating her friend all along. Skye screams, vowing not to let it control her any longer. She convinces herself that the demon is a creation of her own mind, but in an instant, she finds herself behind the wheel of her own car. Skye arrives at an abandoned pizzeria where Morris waits to perform the heart-stopping experiment. He leads her to a freezer where he prepares to stop her heart, explaining that exactly 8 minutes later, he will inject adrenaline to bring her back. This, he believes, will rid her of the demon. As he sets everything up, Skye confesses that she's doing this because she ruins everything around her, destroying the lives of everyone she loves. As the process begins, Morris leaves the freezer and the entity materializes before Skye. It takes the form of herself on the night of the accident, its eyes hollow, its smile twisted and malicious. It attacks her, stretching her lips into a grotesque grin with its thumbs. But Skye bites off its fingers, grabbing a syringe filled with medicine and injecting it into her neck. The entity laughs, a dark, echoing sound that fills her ears as it tells her that this isn't real and taunts her. In the blink of an eye, Skye is no longer lying on the table. She's back on stage with Elizabeth by her side. The crowd cheers as Joshua, Darius, and hundreds of fans stand in front of her. Skye watches, horrified, as the monstrous entity emerges from her body, crawling up to her mouth, its grotesque form pulling itself inside, devouring her from within. But just as quickly she stirs, lifting her head with an unsettling grin, her smile wide, chilling, and unnatural. Then, to the audience's growing horror, she turns her hands against herself. Blow by blow, she mars her once radiant face. By the end, her features are unrecognizable, her fans too stunned, too horrified to look away. And with that, this story ends here. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel.